Welcome to Recogs, the Inventory Success Podcast, where we discuss how the top operators source, manufacture, finance, and sell their inventory in order to create successful businesses. I'm your host, Mike Gelb. I'm the community manager here at Manufactured. Manufactured is the inventory success platform for consumers and B2B companies. Now, what do we mean when we say inventory success? Well, we help SMBs manufacture, finance, and distribute products across 20 categories. And if you're looking for help to reduce your COGS, or you're looking for inventory financing or PO financing, or selling across new channels, we're happy to see if we can help at manufactured.com. Now, I know this is a free podcast, but that doesn't mean we don't have a favor to ask you. If you're enjoying the show, if you can please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening to this, so you don't miss out on the next episode, and it would really also help us out. That would really be terrific. And if you can also leave us a review on the Apple Podcasts, that'd be awesome. Now, not only do we produce content devoted towards SMBs, but we also throw events to help foster community across the US and also launching in Canada. To subscribe to be in the know when our next event is in your city, check out manufactured.com/events. The link is also located in the show notes. This week, we have Michael Markesbery, who is the co-founder and CEO of OSOS Labs and SolarCore. OSOS Labs is a materials technology company focused on creating the most scientifically advanced thermal solutions on the planet. Their materials product is Solacore. Solacore is revolutionizing the product insulation industry by using space technology and using space technology in outdoor apparel, also in commercials and buildings, and also used by the government, which is pretty amazing. So this is less an episode on inventory and inventory management, more so an episode when it comes to our product innovation, particularly focused on the outdoor industry. Without further ado, here's Michael. Michael, thanks for joining me here today. How are you?
Mike, I'm super excited to be here. How you doing?
Oh, so excited to have you, Michael. So excited to have you. Let's start from the very beginning. What was the aha moment or insight that led you to founding OSOS, and tell us a little bit about it?
Great question. When I was in college, I backpacked across Europe, ended up climbing my first mountain in the Swiss Alps. It was an amazing experience, but one really big problem. On top of the mountain, I looked like the Michelin Man, tons of bulk and tons of layers. And I remember thinking that, there had to be a better way to cut the bulk, cut the layers, still stay warm. So came back to the US and started working with a friend on insulation. We started looking into insulation, everything from buildings to batteries to cold chain packaging. Learned that all of these industries were struggling with the same challenge that I had in apparel. So as an example, we're both in a building right now, half the world's energy consumption, 50%, trillions of dollars a year goes to producing heat. Largest consumer of that heat, buildings and structures. Said another way, you just improve the insulation in buildings and structures by a couple percentage points. You can save hundreds of billions of dollars of energy consumption a year. All that to say, we quickly learned that the challenge wasn't apparel, the challenge was insulation. And we became obsessed with figuring out this insulation problem. I then got super lucky, got a scholarship created by the Mercury 7 astronauts called the Astronaut Scholarship. And through the astronaut, learned about this amazing technology called aerogel that NASA was using to insulate spacecraft. Thought, oh my gosh, okay, so this is the best insulation on Earth, the lowest thermal conductive solid. You're using it to insulate things in the coldest environment in the universe, space, but it's not being used in all these other applications here on Earth. Like, what are we missing here? This makes no sense. So we became passionate with figuring out how to make aerogel work in applications here on Earth, and launched OSOS Labs.
Why is aerogel a hard material to actually make work for apparel or other use cases for insulation.
Yeah, so aerogel is an amazing material. It's the lowest thermal conductive solid, so it's the best insulation on Earth. And you'd think, right? Like if it's so good, of course it should be used in all these industries. So the question was, why wasn't it? It doesn't make any sense. And we got our hands on it and immediately found out why this amazing material wasn't being used. And it turned out that aerogel is super brittle. If you poke it, it just shatters into 1,000 little pieces. So we became passionate about figuring out how do you take this amazing material and just make it not brittle so that you could use it in whatever application you want. Ended up creating the world's first flexible and durable aerogel composite called Solacore foam, and launched it out to the world.
What was I guess the break or I guess not breaking point since it was really brittle and breaking all the time, but the point of which I guess the opposite is what I'm trying to say. The point at which where it actually was able to stick together and actually stay together. What was I guess your innovation that really allowed it for different use cases?
Yeah. So if you there's only so many different types of insulation used in the world today. It comes down to three form factors. You've got either a foam, a fiber, or a textile. That's pretty much it. Majority of insulations out there, either a foam, fiber, textile. So we knew we had to create an aerogel version of one of those three, foam, fiber, textile. And if you try to take aerogel, this really brittle substance, and you try to put it on something like a fiber or textile, the challenge is the aerogel, because it's so brittle, just sheds off. Kind of bad news bears. So that left really one option, which was foam. And the cool thing with foam is instead of like a fiber or textile where you're putting aerogel onto something, with a foam, you can put aerogel into it and hypothetically prevent all of the shedding and brittleness challenges that would be with the fiber and textile. So we tried it out and it worked. And also, fortunately, Riff, fellow co-founder, and I, big outdoor geeks, and you look at the outdoor industry, foam's used everywhere for insulation. We both could take off our shoes right now and look at the insole. Guess what that is? That's foam. I live here in Oregon. My summer sport's been kiteboarding, and even in the summer, when you go kiteboarding out here, you need a wetsuit. Guess what's in your wetsuit? Neoprene. Guess what neoprene is? Foam. The cooler your mom packed for you when you were a kid, the squishy cooler. Guess what insulates that? Foam. So foam's used everywhere. So we were able to make this flexible, durable aerogel composite, combining foam and aerogel particles, and get mass adoption across consumer, commercial, and government markets.
And that material that you all created, that then became SolarCore. Is that right?
Exactly. So that was the first product we launched, Solacore foam, within the Solacore platform.
Got it. And so what was in the initial, because it's, very innovative, obviously, a lot of innovation there with the actual product. What was kind of the idea from the beginning? Because it seems like you can go multiple avenues there when it came to commercialization. You can obviously create your own brand, but I guess at the same time, it might be complicated to create your own brand too, because there's so many different applications for this type of material, even in the outdoor space, right? I mean, that there's just so many different functions that you can actually use it for, or you can maybe be a supplier for other brands, or maybe there's uses on the government side or other avenues. What was your thinking, you and your co-founders' initial thinking after you've got the actual material correct? And also, when did you know that you actually got the material right and that, okay, this actually works with foam?
Awesome questions. So, Oros Labs is a material technology company. We create thermal materials, sell those thermal materials across three industries: government, consumer, commercial. When we created the company and created Solacore Foam, we originally created an apparel brand. And the apparel brand served one major purpose for us as a company. It was a way to generate awareness around the technology platform, around Solacore. And then within the last couple of years, we had garnered some pretty significant traction with Solacore across our three industries, government, consumer, commercial, where today we have a variety of government contracts with the Department of Defense, have some great commercial partners across batteries and buildings and structures and aerospace, and insulate footwear and apparel in the consumer space with some really great brands, everyone from Helly Hansen to Merrill. Um, and so the question then became, hey, what's the value add of the apparel brand moving forward? Does it still generate enough awareness now that we have awareness in our three industries? And the answer was no. So we decided to license this apparel brand that we built to a large PE firm in Chicago who is running with the apparel brand going forward, and get a royalty on all future sales. They buy SolarCore from us, et cetera, just like uh, any other brand partner.
Was that kind of always the intention to actually build an apparel brand only for to kind of attract awareness as a brand awareness, but not awareness for the brand, the actual awareness for the technology itself?
That was the main fundamental goal. I mean, of course, the brand generates revenue, some degree of profit as well. But the fundamental goal, at least when we created it, was to generate awareness around the company and the fundamental technology, Solacore.
So on the B2B side, since your main business, obviously this is a material for other material companies or other inventory physical product companies to use. How how do you approach, I guess, some of these companies? I know you're working with Merrill and kind of other outdoor companies. How do these types of how are these deals kind of structures, and are you all doing the manufacturing, for example, for of SolarCore? Is that produced at a separate manufacturer, or under Merrill, or under a different company that you're working with? How does that all work?
First and foremost, the brand needs to have an insulation opportunity or challenge where they're either coming out with an insulated product, or they have an insulated product, but they want to improve upon the insulation of that product. Ultimately, the value proposition that SolarCore offers in the consumer product space is, for the first time in history, less is more, right? For the first time in history, you can have more warmth, less bulk. For the first time in history, you don't need to look like the Michelin man to stay warm. That allows you to completely reinvent certain consumer product categories. When I was growing up, for example, my insulated hiking boot was this bulky boot that I never looked forward to wearing. Now with SolarCore, you can have an insulated boot that looks like your summer hiking boot, gives you all the mobility of your summer hiking boot, but packs the insulation and warmth of that bulky boot that no one liked to wear. So SolarCore allows you to completely reinvent certain product categories within consumer from an insulation perspective, where for the first time in history, less is more. Um, so first and foremost, brand needs to have that insulation challenge. We then meet with the product development teams at these respective brands to introduce the technology. Hey, we're Oros Labs, our technology SolarCore, your brand so and so. This is where you're using insulation. And then from there, we move forward, identify specific projects that they want to work on, sample SolarCore foam. We'll also provide all the spec sheets and all the data. Generally speaking, the brands we work with like to do their own validation of the claims we're making on SolarCore foam. So they validate with third-party labs generally the thermal performance and yada yada. They make prototypes, and then when they're ready, we go to market together. SolarCore is branded physically on all the products we work on. So if you're in a store, look for Powered by SolarCore physically on the product, as well as on dedicated hang tags. And then I think the follow-up question was, hey, when you, how does the manufacturing work? So we'll manufacture SolarCore foam, and then we supply that Solacore foam to the vendors that manufacture the end goods for the respective brand. Those vendors will then take Solacore foam, implement it into the product just like they would any other material or anything else on the BOM, manufacture the end product and send it to the brand for retail.
I guess starting with that initial process, what data or validations do you typically claim?
Yeah, so we'll provide a whole spec sheet, as well as a couple of different certifications. So, for example, Solacore Foam's Okiotex 100 certified, which is a really important claim for any textile. So we'll provide all those certifications, and then we'll also provide all the thermal performance claims. So we've done a lot of third-party lab testing, all according to ASTM standards around thermal conductivity and R value, basically just showing the thermal performance gains that you can have with Solacore foam over other existing solutions in the market.
So I know that you mentioned, boots is one of the examples, and what typically, since the outdoor space, so there's so many obviously different products, different gear one needs, and I'd imagine SolarCore could be maybe useful for a lot of that gear, or many of that gear that of course need insulation. What have you found so far? So far in terms of like the main use cases for SolarCore that have been resonating with the big brands that are in the space?
Yeah, so within the consumer market, you mentioned footwear. Insulation's needed in winter footwear pretty soon. And where Solacore foam has found the biggest home in footwear is underneath the footbed, so where your foot sits. And the reason for that is every insulation that's ever existed has had a major challenge or flaw. And the challenge is they all need bulk or loft to work. That's why your jacket is so puffy. That's why it looks like the Michelin Man on top of the mountain. It's the same reason why if I were to tear down the walls in this office, behind the walls would be fiberglass. Fiberglass is super lofted as well. All these insulations need that airspace or loft or bulk to work. And the second you compress them, you lose all the airspace, thereby lose a majority of your thermal performance. So all of these insulations need that loft, that bulk, that airspace to work. Take that same concept, now apply that into a footbed in a shoe. Well, guess what? You're standing on your footbed when you're using your shoe. So you're actually compressing all that insulation and losing a lot of the thermal value that you had in a fully lofted state. That dependency on loft and bulk isn't true with aerogel, thereby not true with Solacore foam. Meaning, for the first time in history, you can have a thin amount of insulation that gives you significant thermal value. Or in the case of footwear, you can have a piece of Solacore foam that withstands and maintains its thermal insulation under compression. That's the fundamental difference with Solacore foam, and why it's also found a great home within footwear, specifically in the footbed.
I know when we spoke last time, it was we spoke a lot of, can you get the same insulation as wearing a long sleeve shirt than you do in a puffy jacket? And I remember, I believe that you were about to, on the Oro side, before you all sold that business to a private equity group, you were launching a long sleeve shirt that essentially has that amount of that same insulation. Has that been, I'd imagine for many of these brands, that's probably a huge pain point, and could be incredibly an incredible piece of technology for them to utilize. Has that been working as well, to actually using that side of SolarCore to address in the apparel space?
Awesome question. So today, the only solution that we've launched into the consumer industry is Solacore foam. And Solacore foam is used in apparel. Several great brands such as J. Lindbergh, Spider, so on use Solacore foam in apparel to elicit, for the first time in history, not needed to look like the Michelin Man to stay warm, more warmth, less bulk. To create a long sleeve shirt that keeps you warm sub freezing, you need to take the same aerogel proposition, but put it into a fiber while also finding a way to prevent the shedding challenge that putting aerogel on fiber has had historically in the past. That has been a major initiative for us at Oros Labs, creating that technology. That technology has been created and is currently in testing with one of our larger partners, the United States Department of Defense.
What also are the opportunities that you all are doing currently on the commercial side? And where do you see in terms of use cases? I know you're still a very, very young company, and it's so impressive what you all have built so far. What are kind of the use cases so far that have been working on the commercial side?
Again, we sell Solacore foam across three industries: government, consumer, and commercial. We've talked a lot about consumer so far. Consumer is sales of Solacore to brands in the consumer space, namely across footwear and apparel. We do have some equipment partnerships as well. Commercial is everything from buildings and structures to aerospace componentry to batteries to cold chain packaging. We have partners across each of those spaces that are utilizing Solacore today. And then our largest industry, our largest customer is within government, namely the Department of Defense. With the Department of Defense, we have 5 contracts or programs spanning everything from insulated tactical shelters or really, really big tents to pipe insulation to cold chain packaging.
Back on the consumer side, for a minute, are you once there's an opportunity for one of the big brands that are in the outdoor space, and they want to see a that SolarCore can provide innovation within that particular product. How as well, and once you've talked to the manufacturers and designed with the brand, the product itself, utilizing SolarCore, how tends for the production of those units? Is it typically done from is it typically a licensing deal? How typically are those deals structured? Just because we haven't had yet, I don't think on this podcast, a materials company that actually is maybe no longer a brand or is a brand, but really focus on the innovation of the actual material they have, and actually then utilize that material to other brand. And also love the strategy. Reminds me of like Intel Inside with having SolarCore brand, on the actual product itself. But how do those deals get structured?
It's super simple. We sell sheets and rolls of Solacore foam to our brand partners. Those sheets and rolls get sent to the vendor. The vendor then incorporates the technology into the product, just like they would any other piece of material. And one of the mandates we have with any of our partners is branding physically on the product.
Do you then have to order? I mean, obviously, then you're producing then your own materials. In terms of structuring that, does the brands typically, are they paying you up front and then you all are getting those produced? Is there more like financing involved? How does it kind of work from like that standpoint, from a cash flow perspective?
Totally. Our standard payment terms are net 30 from exit factory, which means once Solacore leaves our manufacturing facilities, we get paid within 30 days of that Solacore departing the factory.
Got it. And in terms of your own factory, is it factories that you actually are producing your Solacore technologies? Like, are you vertically integrated, or are you partnering with a factory in order to produce your products?
Namely, contract manufacturing. So one of the things that's been really important for us is, you know, aerogel historically has been a really complex thing to produce. And one of the big focuses in process engineering for us over at Oros Labs has been, how do you take this really amazing but complex material and make it really simple and easy to produce such that you can have the luxury of choice to work with traditional contract manufacturers?
Got it. Got it. Has that been tough? I'd imagine now, since you're established, you have the manufacturers that you trust. But building that network of manufacturers from the beginning, was that hard to do, just because you wanted them to produce something that's very revolutionary?
What's the what's the quote from Abraham Lincoln? Like, I'm going to butcher it, but something about, hey, if I had, 24 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend 23 hours sharpening the axe, kind of thing. The exact same thing with this process. If you spend enough time on the process engineering, and you figure out how to make it a really simple thing to implement for a contract manufacturer, then establishing relationships with contract manufacturers is super easy. If, on the other hand, you need a bunch of fancy equipment that said contract manufacturer doesn't know how to use, or it'd be super expensive to implement you into their system or production lines, then it's a lot harder to establish that relationship with contract manufacturers. So we purposely spent that 23 hours up front figuring out the process engineering such that it's a super easy implementation for the contract manufacturers that we work with.
That's helpful, because we had on previously a very different industries, but we had on previously a contract manufacturer in the food and beverage space. And what he was saying was, sometimes entrepreneurs will come to him with a product and it's so complex that it's like, hey, we can't, this is actually not scalable in like the current formulation, or you're going to be ending up spending up so much money in this formulation how you're currently doing without tweaks, that in terms of from your price point, it's going to get it's going to get really hard to actually produce what you want at the price point that you want it to. So obviously this is very, very different, because those were kind of BDC companies that they were dealing with.
The philosophy is the same, though. You're absolutely right. Simplicity tends to win out the day.
What was hard about making, because it sounds like a pretty complex product, what was hard about making it actually simplified so it actually could be produced at scale max?
Yeah, there are a couple facets. The first facet was, how do you take the aerogel and implement it into the foam? A lot of that's proprietary, but also a lot of it's in our published patents. So just briefly speaking to it, the way you make foam, or one of the methods of making foam, I should say, is very similar to making bread. It starts off as a liquid batch. And then you add this stuff called foaming agents, which acts very similar to yeast in bread. And then you put that mixture in an oven. And just like bread with yeast in an oven, bread rises, create a bun. Same thing with foam. Foaming agents in the liquid batch, put all that in an oven. Out comes, we literally call it a bun of foam. And you just slice that foam to your desired thickness, just like with a loaf of bread when you're making a sandwich. Exact same concept. What we patented was taking aerogel particles, and as you're adding in the foaming agents, adding in the aerogel particles, and it's that simple. Of course, there's a little bit more complexity to it around what's the right volume fraction of aerogel, what's the right particle size, da 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 da. But in essence, as you're adding your quote unquote yeast, your foaming agents, you just add your aerogel particles as well, and out comes Solacore foam.
Finding aerogel particles, is that hard to find, or hard to source, or not actually so much?
Believe it or not, aerogel's been around since 1931. It's not new. It was created by this American scientist named Samuel Kistler, weirdly off of a bet. All that to say, the original IP on the original aerogel, an amorphous silica-based aerogel, has long since expired. There are about 8 major manufacturers of aerogel around the world. So sourcing that raw aerogel is decently easy. The challenge, remember, was, hey, how do you take this amazing insulation that's super brittle and just make it not brittle so you can use it whenever you want?
Right. I was just thinking that if aerogel is primarily used for space technology and not as much for, use cases on Earth, that it might be tougher to, actually produce the amount of mass to produce the quantities that you actually want to produce or find that here, just because it was only kind of used for space previously. But it sounds like that actually is not that big of an issue.
No. There's an increasingly growing amount of aerogel manufacturers around the world. At least the original aerogel amorphous silica.
Michael, this has been incredibly fascinating. I have a final question for you. We typically ask, so on this show, I will be honest, we typically have more like B2C founders on it. So this might be an odd question, but I'm going to try it anyway. What would you rather have or value more? $100 of COGS, so $100 of SolarCore technology, or $100 cash?
I would say $100 of COGS, because we could sell that and create a profit greater than $100 cash.
There you go. Love it, Michael. Great answer. All right. This is awesome. Michael, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Mike, it's good to catch up. Good to see you. Glad to hear you're doing well. Talk soon.
And there you have it. Michael, thanks so much for coming on the show. I hope you all enjoyed listening. Wherever you're listening to this content, if you can please like and subscribe this episode, that would be amazing. We also don't only do content, we also throw events. So our goal is really to bring together the consumer ecosystem around the country. So please sign up for our events at manufacture.com/events. If you don't know what Manufactured is, what we are is a inventory success platform. We help brands with manufacturing, financing, and distributing their inventory. So just in case you might be looking for financing, if you get a PO and you're looking for financing that PO, or you're looking for manufacturing to help, feel free to go on our website and contact us. We would love to see if we can help. Thank you.